document. My name is Yvonne Somerville and I'm one of the education officers in the Numeracy and Maths team at Education Scotland, and I support across the Tayside region. I'm also joined tonight by my colleague Neil Miller. I'll let you introduce yourself, Neil.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hello everyone and welcome to this evening. My name is Neil Miller. I am Senior Education Officer here at Education Scotland for Expressive Arts and Culture, and I work within the National Directorate, so I have a national remit, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing this with you this evening.
Great, thank you. And we're also joined by a couple of other Education Scotland colleagues. We've got Maria and Nanette from the Numeracy and Maths team who are keeping an eye on the chat for us. And we're also joined by Ian and Diane, who are from Education Scotland's event side of things. And Ian will be recording the session tonight. So just a couple of protocols as we get started tonight. If you're able to keep your microphone muted, it just helps with the interference. We do have the option for you to post in the chat tonight, but sometimes it can get quite busy when the call has a lot of people on it, so we would encourage you to use the Padlet that Maria is going to share for you, and Maria and Annette can keep an eye on any questions that come in that way. No question is a silly question as we go through tonight, so please do answer, post your comments on there. If for any reason tonight you have any difficulty hearing us or the slides disappear for you, we would always recommend that you try clicking the leave button and rejoining to see if that works. It's a bit like turning it on and off again. A reminder that the session is being recorded tonight, so just being aware if you do put your camera on and things like that, you will be captured in the video, and we will email the slides out, or the lovely Diane will email the slides out to you after the session, so don't need to scribble everything down. Hopefully you are familiar with using Teams, but if this is maybe one of your first sessions on Teams, just a few of the buttons to kind of make you aware of. If you're joining from a desktop, your options bar will look like this top one here. You've got your camera and microphone under the blue, and you've got the raise your hand and chat in the green and the leave button in the red. If you're joining on the likes of a mobile phone or a device, a tablet, you might have slightly smaller options, and these look like the options below. You still have all the same functionality, it's just a bit smaller on your screen. So you have the option to mute your microphone and camera, and you have the red hang up button, and when you click the three dots, so that's where you get the option to chat and the reactions as well there. So fingers crossed you'll be able to do that. And as we said tonight, we do have the Padlet, that place for you to park all of the questions that you've got, any comments as we go through, and we will kind of pick them up periodically as we go through tonight. So really the reasons why we are here is to have a look around the new Numeracy and Expressive Arts document that was published just a couple of weeks ago, to help you to understand a little bit around the rationale around why this document has been published, and for you to begin to think about some of the ways that you can use this guidance, either as a practitioner within your own class, or it might be that you're looking across departments, or it might be, we know that we've got some colleagues here who are actually considering how this document might be used at school level, and we've got some central authority staff here who are thinking about that kind of wider aspect of how these messages can be shared. So lots of people here with lots of different purposes, and we hope that you'll find tonight's session useful. So I'm going to hand you over to Neil, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the background for this document.
Thanks, Yvonne. So the rationale for this document started with essentially my appointment to Education Scotland, which was 11 months ago, and I started off working with Yvonne, and we started talking around the notion of numeracy and expressive arts. I'd come straight from school, and obviously I have an expressive arts background, but obviously I'd also experience in a senior leadership role in a large secondary school. And within that context, we started looking at reports that were being published, and two key reports from the art side were a music report, which is the What's Going On Now, and the recent Dance Education in the Primary School in Scotland document. And essentially these two documents that are externally published with Education Scotland had the same themes about the notion of the lack of confidence in practitioners to deliver the arts, but also the time to deliver the arts. And our experiences within schools were that other key educational drivers were driving forward school improvement. So things like, this will not be anything new to you, you'll know all this, things like literacy, numeracy, close the attainment gap, careers education what are the major driving forces behind improvement plans up and down the country. So there was an opportunity here to see, well, how can we link these things together in order to promote the teaching of expressive arts, but also look at interdisciplinary learning as well through numeracy, so that it serves both these documents and answering the big questions in these documents, as well as answering the big questions around numeracy. Obviously, we look to research as well, and part of the OECD research looked at the notion of arts and how arts is taught across globally. Now, you'll be interested to know the United Kingdom and Scotland doesn't feature in this, but it's an illustration. And you'll see, and it's global, the arts in most countries, with probably the exception of Italy and Austria, who are at the top end of the graph, are over 50% delivering arts education in the kind of lower secondary school, and also that evidence also has some resonance in the primary sector as well. And if you align that with mathematics and numeracy delivery, you can see the difference. Now, we didn't need to be Mystic Meg, the late Mystic Meg, to kind of predict this. But what is interesting about these graphs is the fact of the notion that numeracy, as I've just said, drives forward the notion of the curriculum and can indeed be the dominant feature within the curriculum. But again, the question that we asked at Education Scotland, was there any opportunities here to explore numeracy within the contents of delivering expressive arts, which would develop the confidence in practitioners, but also start dynamising the numeracy curriculum for our learners?
Thank you. And just some of the kind of other policy drivers that sit behind this. Hopefully some of you will be familiar with the Making Maths Count report that was published in 2016. It identified that in Scotland we do have that maths problem. Lots of people are quite happy to admit that they're not very good at maths, they don't like it, but actually the kind of repercussions of that deep societal attitude is that actually, you know, economically, these poor numeracy skills are holding our country back. And so the report that was published in 2016 identified some key ways of trying to address that. And the three sort of overarching recommendations that come out of that is around transforming the attitudes to maths. It's about improving the confidence and fluency of maths. And it's also about people kind of understanding that maths has a value and is essential in careers, but also in life and as we go through our education. I think the other kind of key thing that we were thinking as Neil and I were sort of considering the creation of this document was the fact that numeracy is the responsibility of all. We know that, we know that since the kind of beginning of time in terms of curriculum for excellence, but actually what does that mean when we say that numeracy is the responsibility of all? And I think sometimes we can picture that it's about sitting doing calculations and it's about, you know, adding and subtracting and things like that in different elements of the curriculum. But actually, when we go back to the Principles and Practice paper about numeracy being the responsibility of all, you can see that actually it's so much more than that. It's about using relevant contexts and experiences so that children see what they're learning in numeracy has a purpose across other areas of the curriculum. It's about enabling them to make these links so that it's not being taught in isolation. They actually can see why they're being taught maths, why it's important, how they can use these skills. And it goes on to help them see that purpose, that interest in numeracy, the reasoning behind it. It asks children to be able to demonstrate and use the skills that they're learning in other areas. And so it's really key that we begin to think about ways that we can really encourage numeracy being the responsibility of all. And I think one of the kind of catalysts for starting all of this work was Maths Week Scotland 2022. It had the theme of the beauty of maths, and it was very purposely left open-ended. The beauty of maths can look at things like pattern and Fibonacci sequence and the kind of pure mathematical side of things. But actually what we saw coming through Maths Week 2022 was settings engaging in so many creative elements of mathematics, really bringing maths to life. And a lot of what we saw linked really well to the expressive arts. And we've included just a snapshot here on screen of some of the settings looking at some some of the different musical elements in terms of scale and tone, and also some of the artists that have a very kind of mathematical background, and that's very apparent within their work. And Neil's going to talk to you a little bit about some of the external stakeholders and the work that they did during Maths Week as well.
So one of the key things around Maths Week Scotland that really kind of got me thinking, and I said this from the point of view of when I was in school, and my background as a drama teacher before I went into management, was looking at the notion of how do we teach numeracy? Because numeracy for all was something that was like a cloud, and I won't lie about it, a cloud over the department and faculty's head around this. And one of the things that kind of came alive for me was when we collaborated with the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland and we looked at their design programme, their technical theatre and design programme. And the key element to that was listening to how the students were staging productions and how they were designing sets, and they were using key principles around numeracy. So I was hearing language like Pythagoras' theorem, SOHCAHTOA, in a theatre. I'd never heard anything like that in my life. And it got me excited because what I had justified as numeracy was asking a young person to, what was the length of a costume? What was the duration of a lighting state on stage? Really quite tenuous links to the numeracy benchmarks and documents, whereas this transformed that. So the Royal Conservatoire and theatres across the Central Belt collaborated with this and shared that experiences with young people, and really started to kind of shift the notion of numeracy into the focus around arts and how arts can deliver aspects of numeracy, such as Pythagoras' theorem, all around how you angle a light on stage, how you look at using pi in a circle. I'm not a mathematician by any stretch of the imagination. I left that well behind when I could in school. But to hear that language being used, and as an educator, really started to excite me, and to see that being imparted onto the children and young people during Maths Week Scotland was near enough transformational, and was really a key catalyst for Yvonne and I to collaborate to produce this type of document.
Great. And then one of the other kind of main reasons behind this, I think, was trying to challenge some of the stereotypes. And I'm just going to switch screen here. And at the beginning, the Mentee asked you to think about 3 words or phrases that you think about when you hear that term numeracy and maths. And you can see that if you're not familiar with Mentee, the larger the word, the more people have said this. So you can see that it is things like calculations, counting, number, strategies that come into people's heads when they first think about numeracy and maths. Great to see problem solving there. Yeah. If you also begin to kind of look at some of the smaller words, you've got things like failing, tricky, difficult, boring, restrictive, stress. So some negative connotations that are coming through there. Not all. Some people putting some mathematical words like geometry, people putting things like manipulatives and CPA in there, and some people are describing it as safe. But you can see that on the whole, it probably is a bit more negative. And then if we skip on and look at what people are saying when they think about the expressive art side of things, again, you can see words like creative, creativity, art, fun, music, drama, painting, relaxing, joy, enjoyment, relax, performance, interesting. So quite a stark difference in that kind of automatic perception of what do we think about expressive arts and what do we think about numeracy. So I'm just going to reshare the slides again, Neil, and I don't know what you're smiling there as if you're...
it's really interesting because I saw a word empowering in the expressive arts, and that's exactly what I saw in Maths Week Scotland, was empowering, and it was the fusion between the delivery of numeracy and maths, which was the focus of that week, and the arts. And I think this is where the traction is, and I think this is the partly the success of this document is ways that we can get that, all of those key buzzwords around expressive arts to alleviate more like the words within the numeracy aspect. So it's about fusing those two together so that it really starts making and moves forward our education agenda as we move forward in reform as well.
Great.
So we've got here the math stereotype, okay? I didn't put these up, I have to stress, right? I'm a big fan of the Big Bang Theory. You might notice one of the images from that. But this is, again, you know, if we were to extract those words and create images from those words, this is probably what you would think when you think about that math stereotype. The notion of boards being absolutely decorated with formulas and all sorts, as well as the notion of feeling failure and the facial expressions of people going, they just cannot get it. And I can relate to some of that as a learner myself, and I know that many other young people can as well. And it's really interesting. I have an 11-year-old daughter who's apparently very good at maths and numeracy. And every time I hear this, I could fall off my chair because I don't know where she gets it from. Interestingly, her mum is a music teacher. And I wonder if there's any kind of correlation in with that. But this is what you think of when you think of the math stereotypes. And if we counter that with the expressive art stereotype, and again, I did choose some of these images, and it pains me to have chosen some of these images, but I'm going with the word stereotype because I think this is what people think of in society when you think about the expressive arts. It can be exaggerated, over the top, you know, and incredibly theatrical and all the rest of it. But I think it's what's really important is they don't live up to those. Neither does the math stereotype or the expressive art stereotype live up to those things in reality, in the classroom, in the context when you're serving those young people. Because what it does do is it looks to enjoy, it creates enjoyment and creates empowerment that allows us then to create traction into other elements of the curriculum.
And I think one of the sort of key things about this, a lot of people have said to us, I've never really thought about how much these two curriculum areas align. Yeah. And I think, again, if you think back to the sort of stereotypes, they don't automatically seem like two curriculum areas that go hand in hand in the way that, you know, maths and science or maths and technology, people can see the links between them. And I think that's one of the sort of key bits of feedback that we've taken from this, is actually it's really helped people to think about how the skills between the two are intertwined. And I think some of the kind of things that we were looking at as we began to plan around what this document might look like was the likes of the PISA 2022 maths framework that looks at maths in that rapidly changing world. And really at the heart of all of this sits the fact that children need to be able to reason mathematically. And you can see on there that it talks about some of the different contexts. And so when we have looked at some of the examples about how to tie in expressive arts, you can see that there is opportunities for personal context around things that children will be doing in their everyday expressive arts lessons, things that they enjoy, their favourite things. There's also links to the world of work in terms of that occupational context, and there's also some links to the societal, the sort of wider things. You'll see that it brings in things like voting and information handling, because again we know that these are really key skills for our children to be developing, that kind of mathematical literacy, so that they are used to seeing their mathematics being set in a problem solving context. And essentially it's about bringing the children's mathematics to life through real world problems.
What I really like about that slide, and I've only seen that slide recently, is the notion of the meta skills that are in the bottom left of it, and the notion of creativity and critical thinking, and that kind of self-direction, initiative and perseverance, because that's essentially what a good arts education provides. Yes, it can, you know, there's a notion that we create artists for artists' sake, but in actual fact, the skills that young people and children learn through exploring through expressive arts can lend themselves to other areas of the curriculum. And I'm incredibly passionate about that. It's not about the training of the next big thing in the arts. It's about what are the meta skills that are inherent in the curricular areas that we can extrapolate and stretch across the whole curriculum. And I think the arts, and of course I'm going to say this, but I think the arts are absolutely central to this. And the reason I think that is because of the next slide that, everyone, if you don't mind pushing on, is this slide here. This slide was given in a presentation by Andrew Schleicher, who is the Director of Education at the OECD, and he presented this at the Scottish Parliament at the Edinburgh Summit in November last year. And what he said about this slide, which really kind of blew my mind a wee bit, was the notion that when they look at the top-end graduates in OECD countries that occupy the most innovative jobs, they came from the arts. First and foremost, they came from engineering and computing, and you expect that. But then the second in the rung of the ladder here in this graph is arts graduates, who are using all of the meta skills. And again, it's those skills in that mathematics PISA table they've used, how they're using the skills they've learned in those courses to create and think out the box, to create new jobs and move society forward. And I think that's incredibly important as well, because I think that fusing with what we're doing with numeracy, even at the early stages. And, you know, let's not forget this document when we created it was essentially a starter for 10, and it still is a starter for 10. But I think it plays well into the wider discourse of where, you know, what education should be doing for our young people. So I thought this graph was really interesting in demonstrating that in terms of those innovative jobs. And he tells a story that he was in China in Chongqing, which have, you know, massive in terms of IT infrastructure. It's at the forefront of innovation in computing and and technology. And they asked them about, you know, this is great, but we need to know about how we move this on, because this is for now. This is not going to be in 50 years' time. So we need to think around the new creation of jobs, but we need those people that can create those jobs. And we need those people who have those creative skills and what he said was, we need to be looking back to what the arts do. And I just think if the arts are fusing with such things like numeracy, then we're in a win-win situation. Thanks, everyone. So the numeracy and math skills and expressive art skills set out in our national documentation as part of Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence is here, and you can see that both in the expressive arts documentation as well as in the numeracy documentation. And these are absolutely key and will underpin how we deliver the curriculum. There is a lot of personalisation and choice within that curriculum, and that's at the heart of what Curriculum for Excellence is. But at the same time, we look for both curriculum sets to align together. And it's essentially the notion of how can we use these skills and match them to each other. And that's essentially what Yvonne and I have been doing over the last 10 months up to the publication of this document. And as a result of this fusion, we now have the numeracy and expressive arts document. Thanks, Yvonne. This is one of my favourite slides. I use this a lot. I was at a presentation, I've been with the international visit of the OECD this week, and with Professor Louise Hayward as well, and I use this slide. I use this slide quite a bit because I think it says all about the issues that we have in not just Scottish education, but I think in education as a whole. And this for me is around assessment. And to some extent it can also be around learning and teaching as well. And the notion that how we assess has to fit into one particular area. And so the mode of assessment is the tree here, and the teacher is like, right, so this is the national assessment, the standardised way of doing this. This is what we've got, and we've got a variety of learners in front of us. And by the way, by no way am I saying your learners of anything on that screen. I'm going to be very clear here, but the illustration gives clarity to it. And the notion here that we have to cater and differentiate our teaching and learning and assessment strategies in order to ensure that we create authentic knowledge and attainment for our young people. I think that's incredibly important, because it's by doing that we actually demonstrate attainment, and we demonstrate real attainment for our young people. And so this slide is what I think will start empowering change as we enter reform. But also I think, and again I would say this, the arts have got somewhere to play in this, because where I'm at is, or where we're going, is this notion that we're looking to fuse teaching and learning around numeracy and expressive arts, but is there anything in the arts agenda that allow us to assess and create a mixed economy of assessment to suit our learners so that we absolutely get a realistic, authentic knowledge base of where our young people and our children are at in terms of their learning? And I'm excited that we're heading in that direction through the forum. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Now, there's a couple of people saying in the chat that they can't see the slides. I'm hoping that everybody else is able to see them and that you've not just been talking to a blank screen there. So if other people can just let us know that they can see the slides. And Gillian, it should just be a link for rejoin. So if you leave and then click the link in your email, lots of thumbs up there. So I think it's maybe just perfect. Thank you for confirming that. That's great. So before we go into looking at the document completely, we thought it would just be useful to see the background. I know when I kind of worked out in school, I sometimes wondered how these Education Scotland documents came to existence. So it did start off with Neil and I kind of pulling together a draft document, spending a lot of time looking, as we've said, at some of the kind of grounding policies and at our curriculum explicitly. And we pulled together that draft. We then sent it out for internal quality assurance and peer review. So we wanted to make sure that what we had written had very much aligned with the key national messaging. So colleagues within His Majesty's Inspectorate had a look at it, colleagues who are in the organisation with an expressive arts background or with a numeracy and maths background had a look at it and made comments. And it also went out for external quality assurance. So it went out to some of our key partners within local authorities, and it also went out to some practitioners as well. And we wanted honest feedback around where we on the mark, were things in it that were good, were not so good. And I think at this point, it very much was a draft document. And between December and January, Neil and I worked through the comments that we got in. We changed things, we changed the order of things, we took things out, and we did very much make changes based on the feedback that we've got. And then it kind of went out for that final formatting and final sign-off to become the document that you have in front of you now. And we asked you in the Menti, how familiar are you with it? So I'll just put this up, and Neil, you'll be pleased to know that not everybody is sitting as a thick, being very, very confident. So hopefully people will be learning some things from our ramblings here. So actually 1.6, so most people not really that confident with the document, which is understandable. It's only just come out and we appreciate that this is a really busy time in schools just now. In terms of how confident people are using the expressive arts, slightly more confident, but not that very many people who are sitting up at this top end. And good to see that there is a bit more increase in terms of how regularly people are linking together in terms of planning numeracy across learning opportunities. So that's great to see that there. Now I'll just switch back to the slides again. And this is where we begin to actually look at the document in a little bit more detail. And I think Maria has popped the link in the chat. So if this is maybe your very, very first time of looking at the document, don't worry. Oh, let's see what's happening here. Slow down. Yeah, if you've never seen the document, you've just come along to kind of find out a little bit more about it. Now is your chance to click it and have a look at it when it's open. Neil, is that the slides back up again?
It's at slide number 1, so we're right at the beginning again.
Perfect. Is that us there?
Ways to use the document, yep.
That's great. So there are different ways that you can engage with this document. You might be a practitioner who is thinking about how can you tie these two curriculum areas together. And like Neil said, I think sometimes there can be a pressure around numeracy and literacy driving the curriculum. And I know certainly when I was in school as a primary teacher, I often felt that my expressive arts lessons were the kind of add-on. It was the thing that I planned after I had planned everything else. It was sometimes a bolt on around, oh, I'll just at springtime, we'll just do this. In terms of sort of progression of skills, I wasn't as focused on expressive arts, and that really frustrated me as a practitioner, because I come from an expressive arts background in terms of being involved in amateur dramatics and theatre. I'm married to somebody that's heavily involved in the live theatre and entertainment industry, and I know the benefits of it. And I think that's again something that I hope through this document that you can begin to see. It's not a case of one or the other, that actually think about what you're doing in numeracy and think about how you can use that to bring your expressive arts lessons to life. And also, what have you been covering in expressive arts that actually you can use as real and relevant context to discuss in maths. So if you're sitting there and you're a maths practitioner in a secondary department, what are some of the things that you could use to bring maths to life in that real way? We also know that there are some colleagues here who are looking more across departments. So you're maybe looking to link up with your expressive arts departments or with your maths department, thinking about, are there interdisciplinary planned projects that you could be doing together that really help tie these curriculum areas together? And also a discussion around, well, what's the expectation? How are these skills being developed in numeracy? But also, what's the expectation? Neil talked about measure. What are they being expected to be able to measure at certain points? And also, what does that look like in terms of the learning that goes on in the maths department? And also, some of you might be here in terms of looking at that wider school or across your setting, thinking about, are there things that already exist in terms of these kind of larger scale school projects that actually could be being used to enhance a lot more of collaborative working, and supporting the discussions around what the expectations are within the different subject areas and what that looks like in different discrete parts, and is there that commonality of how they're being brought together? Neil, I don't know if you want to add anything on that one as well, because you've obviously got that secondary perspective.
Absolutely. I think in terms of subjects working in silos, departments working in silos, is a problem, and it's been there for generations, and it's about kind of breaking that down. But it's also about kind of shaking up that kind of pedagogy. And I've just been reading some of the comments on the chat, and the notion that it's ingrained and the art should be kind of front and centre and all the rest of it. The important thing is here that the numeracy and literacy does drive the curriculum agenda, because our young people absolutely deserve that and entitled to that, but they're also entitled to an arts education. And this is an opportunity to look across our settings, across departments, across authorities, across the RIC, to look and see if we can start linking this up in order that we can start providing these opportunities, and to support what I think Yvonne has said, support the start of discussions. Because this is what I want this document to do, is start that notion of discussion around these ideas, because the document could be 100 pages in length. It really could have been, but what we've done is we've created a kind of starter pack for you. But this isn't the end of the dialogue. We want this to continue, and we want you to start that in these particular contexts that are on that slide.
So the way that the document is set out, it begins at early and it goes right through to 4th level. You can see that the experiences and outcomes are listed in the ones that we feel link together. And we've also included the benchmark statements so that you can begin to see what that expectation is at the end of the level in numeracy and maths, but also what is the expectation in that level for expressive arts, so that you can begin to see that actually there is commonality in the expectations across these two subject areas. And then it provides you with some possible context for learning. So you can see the one up on the screen there is an early level example, and it's linking number processes and time in with the drama idea of retelling a story. So you can see here there's that story map, and something that we know happens a lot of time within our ELC and our primary one and those working at early level. But actually, can we make a bit more of an emphasis in terms of the mathematical language that we're using around, first the 3 little pigs get this, then, so that sequencing and order that we're bringing in. We might also want to take that down the route of building in time. So actually at 3 o'clock, the pigs started to build their house. Can you show me on your clocks what 3 o'clock looked like? and building that in as we're retelling the story. One of the questions that we got when this went out for quality assurance and feedback was, why is literacy not linked in there? And I think, again, that was something that Neil and I had a lot of discussion back and forward about. Should we include the other curriculum areas? And I think what the conclusion that we came to was, if we started to link in every possible context across the curriculum, this wouldn't really be a numeracy and expressive arts document. It would just become numeracy across the curriculum, and that's not what we were looking for this document. And so we've purposely left it open so that, yes, you may very well bring in literacy experiences into this type of activity. You might bring science into some of the other ones. You might bring technology into the other ones. It's not prescriptive, and it's very much framed as a possible context for learning. So if I show you one of the other examples, you can see here, this is the first level example, bringing art and design skills in with some of the numeracy and math skills around pattern. And I think the other thing that's important to say is, although this is framed as numeracy within expressive arts, you can see in the likes of this example, these are maths E's and O's that we've included, but you can see that actually there's elements of maths that relate so nicely to expressive arts. And that goes back to that concept about, what do we mean by being numerate? That's so much more than just numeracy skills. It's beyond just calculating and number processes. It's about actually being able to apply your numeracy and math skills in different contexts. So you can see here, it might be that actually you want to tie in other parts of maths to this. You might want to bring in an element of measure in, or it might be that you want to take bits out of it because they're not relevant to where your children are in their learning at the moment. And I think, again, that's really key to the messaging within this document. We don't want it to be that, oh, this is what we do and read in primary 2 and this is the one that we do in primary 3. You don't have to work through them in a specific order, and you can take out the bits that are not relevant. You can add in the bits that are going to enhance what you're already doing.
So again, and really important point that Yvonne's highlighted is, we mapped this in a way that would create some traction across all of the expressive arts and how it would underpin and permeate the numeracy E's and O's and mathematics E's and O's and benchmarks. But that was our mapping. This doesn't necessarily be your mapping. There'll be some examples here in which that you can substitute. So you could take the music out and put in drama or art and design at particular levels. These are just exactly what it says, possible context. So for example, in this, the use of music and the use of notation to support the development of numeracy in terms of things like fractions, timing, rhythm, key words that were in our numeracy and mathematics benchmarks, but also key aspects to the delivery of expressive arts within the second level. Another thing about this document that I'm quite excited about is it's an interactive document. I said to Yvonne when I started that I really wanted this document not to be something that was printed out and pinned to a wall. And I was guilty of doing that as a DHT. I would print off of the new best thing from Education Scotland, put it on a wall, and I promised to look at it, and then I might glance at it. Whereas this, I wanted this to be interactive. And the way we did this was we have given links in the document to other organisations that really go that one step further, that take this document and really bring it alive. So you'll see in this particular slide at the bottom where it says Lesson Pack Science Cayley, the work that they do is really transformational in terms of how they support the notion of the arts, music in particular, and how they're supporting the development of mathematics and numeracy skills. And it's done through videos and things like that. So it can really start bringing alive opportunities for you and your teams in order to really engage with that and use it as showcase, use it as part of departmental meetings, school meetings, local authority meetings, so on, in order to start taking this as a stimulus, this pack as a stimulus, and creating the resource that's going to work for you and your context. And I think that's incredibly important going forward. And again, it's the same here. It's the notion that we link all of this to the wider context of Scottish education. So the notion of my world of work, developing the young workforce, and also including the notion of STEM, the STEM ambassadors in there as well. Because again, there's the debate around STEM and STEAM, and I've said this in public forums already. This time last year, before I was just about to leave my position in school, I was all about the STEAM, all about the STEAM. Now I've been in this job and I've engaged with partners nationally and internationally. Actual fact, I think if we have STEAM, then what happens is if we then think, well, that's one part, that's an aspect of the curriculum, and then RE once on board and social sciences on board, we then get STEAMers, which in a Scottish context doesn't sound great. It's got pretty negative connotations. But also what happens then is we just have the curriculum again. And then we get the hierarchy within that curriculum, and the arts will be at the bottom. And where I think we need to go forward in this is that the STEM agenda, which mathematics and numeracy is a key part of, goes shoulder to shoulder with the arts. And this document is an example of that, I think. And there is other work that I am working on as well that also demonstrates that the STEM agenda and the arts agenda for the economy go shoulder to shoulder, rather than this notion that we're intertwined. And that's been a mind shift for me. That's my personal journey. But this document also kind of relates to that as well. Within the third and fourth levels, there was a lovely comment when we launched it on Twitter that one practitioner wrote, which was that there wasn't any music in the third and fourth level. We took that out because one of our colleagues in the inspectorate had said it looked quite repetitive. And so we decided to take that out in the hope, and it's come alive, in the hope that there would be the examples we used in the earlier levels could be differentiated up and used in the third and fourth level. And there was a comment that a practitioner said that it's easily done. We can easily do that. And I thought, for me, that was incredibly reassuring, because the third and fourth level example is very project-based. And that's been deliberately done because you may or indeed may not have read just yet the interim report that Professor Louise Hayward has now published in terms of our qualifications assessment framework and the notion of a Scottish Diploma of Achievement. And part of that lies interdisciplinary learning. And I was really keen to ensure that, to some extent, we've kind of future-proofed this document, so we enable those opportunities to look across the wider curricular areas within a secondary context or within the delivery of third and fourth level, whatever your context may be, in order to ensure we can deliver that. So that's why we went for a pretty big project-based example in the third and fourth level. But again, that can be broken down. And can be broken down to serve the needs of your learners.
And I think that, again, was one of the comments that we got back from practitioners that looked at it. There was a maths teacher who said, I've never thought about using set plans when I've been teaching scale. My school had a huge stage. I'm desperate to go back with my trundle wheel and just get the kids actually measuring the stage and then drawing a scale drawing. And it goes back to that fact that you may well want to look at a cross-department interdisciplinary project, but you might just want to cherry pick little bits that actually will help to bring your numeracy lesson to life using an expressive arts context, or bringing your expressive arts context, weaving in some of the numeracy skills that children at that stage will already be learning. There is a comment in the car park around using one of the artists' modern to explore shapes and how they fit together and those kind of early discussions. And I think that brings us quite nicely onto this slide, because the top one there is a link that is from the National Galleries of Scotland. We have included that link as one of the early level links, but actually when you begin to explore that pack, that was a piece of work that was done through Maths Week Scotland, and there are packs for early level, but there also is a primary level pack as well for first and second level. And I really enjoyed working on that because, again, when I think back to artists that I'd linked in with maths, it was things like Kandinsky's circles, because it has circle in the title. And actually my eyes were opened in terms of just how many portraits and sculptures involve maths. A lovely example in there around a sculptor who has twins, triplets, sorry, and so the number 3 is represented in almost all of her sculptures, and there's actually a big one on display at one of the galleries in Edinburgh, which again, it was just really nice, and the sort of discussions that you could have around that, and where do you notice 3, why do you think it's included, thinking about with little ones how you could, what's your favourite number, where do you see it, but then thinking about with older learners, actually what is your favourite number, can you begin to build that into your own sculptures and things like that. Neil's already talked about the Science Cayley and the Cayley Counts. Again, there is a whole lesson pack that was created for Maths Week Scotland, so do have a look at that. There is the links to the Young Enterprise Scotland around the enterprise, and I think that's one that's quite key to highlight, because a lot of people say, oh, the enterprise stuff is great, but where do you get the money to start it from? And so again, we've included some links to places that actually can offer you that grow the £5, and they actually provide the kind of start-up money for you. Our partners at the Scottish Book Trust have done a lot of work with us through the Read Write Count programme, in terms of different books and songs and stories and rhymes that link in with a mathematical element. And Neil, you're a big fan of the Scottish Country Dance Pack as well, aren't you?
I am indeed. Those external stakeholders are really important going forward. Obviously, that's a massive part of arts organisations' funding through Creative Scotland, and that engagement with those arts organisations that collaborate with you in your schools, they're also aware of the direction of travel in which this goes in terms of looking at their work that they do and how that looks in terms of numeracy and how in terms of looks at literacy, as well as closing the attainment gap as well. So this is just a flavour. There are loads of companies out there whose work that they're doing serves the agenda around literacy and numeracy. They just don't sell it. They just don't highlight that, because, as I always, they don't necessarily see the connection. And so it's about, our job is to kind of map that through.
And I think it's worth kind of pointing out as well that we work quite closely with a number of these stakeholders that we've included as well. So while they're not Education Scotland written documents, we've very much been part of their quality assurance, of their planning, of their guidance, as they've put their resources together. So they are very much key stakeholders that we do work with. Notice that there's a few bits and pieces coming in the chat. I don't know if there's anything that you want to pick up on, Neil, or if indeed anybody has any questions. There's nothing else in the car park, but we did want to leave some time at the end if people did have questions or comments, things that they wanted to mention.